This man's discovery feeds nearly half the people alive today. The bread on your table traces back to him. The same man stood in a Belgian field and released the first cloud of poison gas in modern war. Most of the air you're breathing right now is nitrogen. Plants live and die needing it, and they can't use a single bit of it. The gas drifts right past them, locked up tight and useless. For all of human history, that was a hard ceiling on how much food the land could ever grow. Farmers rotated their crops and hauled in manure, and still the soil gave back only so much. Then Fritz Haber broke the ceiling. In his lab, he forced nitrogen out of thin air, crushing it under enormous pressure and heat over a metal catalyst until it bonded with hydrogen and turned into ammonia. Ammonia you can turn into fertilizer. A brilliant engineer named Haber-Bosch scaled the trick up from a lab bench to roaring factories. We still call it the Haber-Bosch process. And here's the part that should stop you cold. Roughly a third of all the food grown on Earth today depends on fertilizer made this way. The bread, the rice, the meat raised on grain. That food keeps nearly half the people alive right now from starving. Half of everyone. One quiet chemist pushed back the limit on human life itself. For that gift, the world gave him its highest honor. In 1918, Fritz Haber won the Nobel Prize in Chemistry for making ammonia out of its raw elements. He collected the medal the year after. Sit with what that means. A single reaction, worked out in one man's lab, is the reason billions of people have ever gotten enough to eat. If the story ended right here, Haber would stand beside the greatest benefactors in human history. The man who fed the world. But Haber was never only a chemist. He was a German patriot and a fierce one, the kind of man who felt his country's cause running in his own blood. To him, science and country were one loyalty, not two. And by the time he climbed onto that Nobel stage, his hands had already done something the prize committee said not one word about. Something that would chain his name forever to the exact opposite of feeding people. To killing them? On purpose, in great numbers. Because a few years before the medal, the same genius that pulled food from the sky had gone hunting for a way to win a war. April 22nd, 1915, Belgium. The war had frozen into trenches, two armies dug into the mud, dying by the thousand for a few yards of ground. Haber had a way to break the deadlock. He proposed using chlorine gas as a weapon, not a stray idea he mentioned once. He championed it, worked out how to release it, and pinned on a captain's rank, running the chemistry section of the German War Ministry. That evening, along the line near Ypres, German troops opened thousands of steel cylinders, exactly as Haber had planned. A yellow-green cloud lifted off the ground and rolled on the wind toward the French and Algerian trenches. Chlorine burns the lungs from the inside. Men clawed at their throats and ran. Some drowned on dry land as their own lungs filled. It was the first large-scale poison gas attack in modern war, and Fritz Haber stood right there at the front to watch his weapon work. The numbers are argued over to this day, but that first cloud is commonly put at around 1,000 Allied soldiers killed and thousands more wounded. History would give him a title for it, the father of chemical warfare. 9 days later, the war came home to Haber's own house. His wife was Clara Immerwahr. And she was no ordinary spouse. She was a chemist herself, the first woman ever to earn a doctorate in chemistry from the University of Breslau. She had watched her brilliant husband turn his gift into a weapon. She knew exactly what chlorine did to a human body because she was trained to know. On the night of May 2nd, 1915, days after Ypres, Clara took Haber's army revolver out into their garden and shot herself in the chest. Now walk carefully here, because this is where legend and fact blur together. The popular story says she killed herself in protest against his gas work. Maybe she did, but historians who dug into her life point to more than that. A scientific career crushed simply because she was a woman, a marriage that neglected her, close friends who had just died. A person is rarely destroyed by one single thing. What we do know is colder than any legend. The very next morning, Fritz Haber left her body behind and traveled east to go direct fresh gas attacks against the Russians. For years after, Haber was Germany's celebrated genius, running one of its greatest scientific institutes. He had built his entire life around being a good German. Decades earlier, he had even converted from Judaism to Christianity to belong completely. He had served Germany in its war, poured his genius into its cause and asked for nothing back but to be one of them. None of it saved him. In 1933, the Nazis took power, and their new laws ordered him to fire the Jewish scientists working under him. Haber refused. Instead, he resigned his own directorship and walked out of the institute he had made famous. A man of Jewish descent, suddenly unwanted in the country he had served, gasped for and fed. He left Germany, sick and worn down, drifting across Europe looking for somewhere that would take him. He never found it. On the 29th of January, 1934, in a hotel room in Basel, Switzerland, Fritz Haber's heart simply gave out. He was 65 years old, an exile far from the home that had thrown him away. But the cruelest turn in his entire story had not happened yet. It was still waiting, quietly, inside his own laboratory. Back in the 1920s, Haber's institute had done ordinary work on pesticides, poisons meant to kill insects in grain stores and ships' holds. That research, built on cyanide, produced a fumigant called Zyklon A. Other chemists later refined it into a stronger version. They named it Zyklon B. Haber had no direct hand in that final product, and he was already dead when it found its true purpose. The Nazis carried Zyklon B into the gas chambers. They used it to murder more than 1 million people, most of them Jews, in the same chambers using the same chemistry aimed at the very people he had been born among. And here, the story closes a circle so dark it barely feels real. Fritz Haber was born a Jew. Members of his own extended family, a niece, her husband, and their 2 children were killed inside those camps. The line of research that began in his own laboratory helped build the machine that murdered his own blood. The father of chemical warfare had, in the end, poisoned his own house. He never lived to see it. Maybe that was the one mercy he was granted. Here is where I land. We badly want to file people away. Hero or monster, pick one, move on. Haber breaks that habit completely. The same mind, the same stubborn brilliance, gave us the bread and the gas. Not a good Haber and a separate evil one. One man, one set of hands doing both. And I don't think you get to split him in half. You can't keep the fertilizer and hand the chlorine off to some other guy. Whoever does the work owns the whole result, the harvest and the corpses together. No committee, no uniform, no flag. Takes that off your hands. What really gets me is the excuse he reached for. He said the gas would break the stalemate and shorten the war. Save lives, supposedly. That is the oldest and most comfortable lie there is. I did the terrible thing for a good reason. And smart people tell it best because they can build the argument so cleanly. Haber proves something uncomfortable. Genius is just horsepower. It will drive you toward feeding millions or toward killing them, and it will never, on its own, tell you which way to point. That part is on you. So I will hand it to you. 1/3 of the food on this entire planet exists because of Fritz Haber, and the first cloud of poison gas in modern war exists because of him too. Same man, same hands. He never picked one side of himself to be. He was all of it at once, right up to the end. If you had to write the single line under his portrait in a history book, what would it say? Benefactor? Killer? Both, somehow, in the same breath? I go back and forth on it myself. Tell me in the comments and be honest about it, because I don't think there is a clean answer here, and I don't trust anyone who says there is. If you like stories about the people history can't neatly sort into good and bad, stick around and subscribe. There are so many of them. And almost none of the interesting ones were ever simple. That is exactly why they're worth telling.